Good evening, everybody. I'm Bill Griffith in tonight for Tyler Matheson, who actually will join us a little bit later in the program.
That's right, and I'm Susie Garib. Good evening from me as well. Media mergers were all the talk today as Rupert Murdoch made it clear he has a new target. Time Warner. Media mogul Murdoch made a bold bid for the company. His 21st Century Fox offered $80 billion, but Time Warner rejected it. Now, that doesn't mean the story is over. Far from it. Many believe the price tag could go even higher, and if the deal does get done, it could prompt a new wave of mergers in an industry already seeing a lot of changes. The news sent shares of Time Warner soaring 17%. It had the opposite effect, though, on 21st Century Fox, which dropped 6%. So what is it about Time Warner that Murdoch wants? Does this deal make sense? And which companies might be next? Julia Borston has our story.
Rupert Murdoch envisioned a media colossus, combining rivals with some key complementary assets. Fox bringing its signature broadcast network, plus cable networks Fox News and FX, while Time Warner has an unprecedented premium cable asset, HBO, plus ad-supported TBS and TNT. There's also a sports story in this proposed merger. Time Warner's TNT and TBS control rights to Major League Baseball, as well as the NBA and college basketball. Meanwhile, Fox has been investing to build a sports empire to rival ESPN, with the launch of Fox Sports 1 last year. Less complementary and more competitive, the movie studios, Warner Brothers and 20th Century Fox. Together, the two companies have 35% of the U.S. box office share this year. Analysts see cost savings in such scale, but sources tell me Fox would want to likely maintain an iconic media brand like Warner Brothers, the largest Hollywood studio. The combined company would not include CNN because of Fox News. CNN would have to be sold off over antitrust concerns. It makes sense that in the wake of mega distribution mergers, Comcast and Time Warner Cable, DirecTV and AT&T, that Murdoch sees value in content's scale of more negotiating leverage. But Time Warner says it's not interested in the offer for a combination of cash and non-voting stock.
The board concluded that continuing to execute our strategic plan and our business plans will create significantly more value for the company and our shareholders, and that's superior to any proposal that Fox is in a position to offer.
Time Warner and Fox say they are no longer in talks. The question is whether Fox comes back with more or another buyer jumps in.
I think one of the dynamics that Time Warner faces is that there is no controlling shareholder, and therefore the company really is in play.
Other cable content companies may also be in play. Discovery, AMC Networks, and Scripps Networks Interactive all trading higher on the news. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston in Los Angeles.
And with more on whether this deal makes sense and what it could mean for the whole media industry, we're joined tonight by Tuna Amobi, the equity analyst at S&P Capital IQ. Tuna, always good to see you.
Likewise.
A lot of famous brands involved in this possible merger. The big question, does it make sense to you?
The short answer is absolutely. It does make sense. And while we did not anticipate a mega merger of this magnitude, you know, when you think about how the game is played in the media landscape these days, it's all about scale. And I think Julia alluded to that in her report, where she talked about the scale plays that we've seen in the distribution side of the equation. So I think the content providers like Fox and Time Warner are kind of responding to this wave of consolidation in order not to leave themselves vulnerable as they go into negotiations with the distributors.
So, Tuna, this is a huge deal. $80 billion was the initial offering price. How much higher do you think it goes? And will Rupert Murdoch have to make this a hostile deal for him to actually win Time Warner in the end?
You know, Susie, as always, valuation is always a sticking point in these kinds of negotiations. I suspect that, you know, Rupert has made a somewhat lowball offer, and I would not at all be surprised by a significantly higher offer, if only to just get Time Warner, talking. We calculate that the premium that was implied, you know, north of 20%. I think we calculate about 12.5 times forward enterprise value to EBITDA, which I would argue is somewhat low for a company like Time Warner with the unique array of assets that it has. You know, I would even go as far as to say that anything less than 13.5 times to 14 times enterprise value multiple would be a steal for Fox.
I kept hearing the arguments against the deal in terms of the amount of debt that 21st Century Fox would have to take on. They're a relatively small company when you consider the size of a Disney or some of the other media concerns out there. Does that matter to Rupert Murdoch? Is this another case where he's got his sights set on the prize, and no matter what the cost, he will get it?
I think it does matter, but if anything, I think the stars are right now aligned for these kinds of mega mergers. Interest rates are still at relatively historic lows, and there is a very good case to be made here. They've talked about $1 billion in potential synergies, and it's very not hard to foresee the revenue upside and cost savings even exceeding that. So I think that if you put everything together in the context of the consolidation wave, I think a deal like this would not seem far-fetched.
You're talking a lot about other mega mergers. As you look at the media landscape, who are some of the other buyers and who are some of the targets? The name Discovery comes up, Viacom comes up as possible buyers. Is that how you see it? Sure.
I think what's going to happen, Susie, is that all the other companies out there are going to be examining themselves and potentially looking for dance partners here, so as not to be vulnerable. So you mentioned some of those names like AMC Networks, Discovery, Scripps Networks. And I think it's not even inconceivable that a major technology company like Amazon or even Google could swoop in here and make a competitive bid for Time Warner.
It certainly got everybody talking, that's for sure. Tuna, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Tuna Amobi joining us tonight.